Hi, everybody. Before we begin, I announced this 15-20 minutes ago, but in case you came in recently, if you parked on the street at a metered spot, they're writing tickets like crazy out there, so you definitely want to go feed that meter. I got a ticket last Thursday, so don't let it happen to you. Feed the meter. Also, I was asked to remind you that there's an event here tomorrow evening. Some Launch Code apprentices, some people who've gone through the Launch Code program are going to be here tomorrow at 6 o'clock, I want to say, is the time that I was told. And so you are all invited. You're all welcome. If you have questions about what the process is like or what being a Launch Code apprentice is like, I encourage you to come and speak with them. We do want people to RSVP, so I believe the link was put on Slack. So just let us know you're coming. It is free as far as I know, but just let us know that you're coming if you plan on attending that particular event. Also, we are nearing the end of Unit 2, believe it or not. We got this week, and we got next week, and that's it. That's the end of Unit 2. So we do have 2 more assignments, one of which is due today. Build a Blog is due today. Blogs is due next Thursday officially. However, the real story is that we expect you to have all the assignments for Unit 2 finished by the deadline, which I want to say is Sunday, May the 6th. I don't know if May the 6th is a Sunday or not, but if it is, that's the deadline. If it's not, then whatever the Sunday is that's closest to that date is the deadline. So hopefully you've been keeping pace. If you haven't, if you're falling a little bit behind, please let us know so that we can help you out, so that we can get you back on track. Today actually is going to be a pretty low-key day. There's no studio today. There's no walkthrough today. It's a catch-up day basically. The last couple weeks have been a lot. I know this, we all know this, so this is sort of an intentional low-key day to give people some breathing room, and then just to give you an idea of what's coming up over the next couple of weeks, we've got some new material. I believe we will have a studio every other day for the next couple of weeks, so Thursday, next Monday, next Thursday as well. However, the concepts that we cover are going to be just kind of tying up loose ends, and I don't expect any of the material that we cover from here to the end to be as difficult as the database stuff that we've been working on in recent weeks. So if you're still a little fuzzy on that database stuff, if it's still confusing to you, if you're still not quite sure what's going on with the database stuff, the ORM stuff, now would be a great time to really hit those concepts. Let me know. I'd be happy to go through any of those concepts with you, review any of that stuff with you, help you out, make sure that your code looks good for ORMs and database kind of stuff, because I know that's going to feature heavily in the assignments as well. So as far as Unit 3 goes, I've been told, and this is still true to the best of my knowledge, that we'll be doing Java. So that's what I've been told. That's what we're going to plan on doing unless I hear otherwise. I've been told that an alternate track will be offered during the Tuesday-Saturday class. I've been told that they'll be doing C#. So if you strongly prefer to do C# over Java, I am like 99% certain that they will give you the option to attend the Tuesday-Saturday class instead, if that's what you would prefer. If you stick here with us, we'll be doing Java. I should note that I don't get to make these decisions, so this information could possibly change, though I don't expect it to. I'm pretty confident that that's what's going to happen. So stay tuned. Ryan will have all of the details of that stuff, and he will be posting it over the next couple weeks to get you prepared for Unit 3. So just keep an eye out on Slack for that information. I know that was kind of a lot. Are there any questions about the end of Unit 2, the beginning of Unit 3? We do have another week off in between Unit 2 and Unit 3 as well. That's on the calendar. Any questions about upcoming dates, upcoming deadlines, upcoming stuff in general before we hop into today's material? We good? All right. Fantastic. So, as I mentioned, we don't have a walkthrough today. We don't have a studio today, but we did have a little bit of new material that I wanted to talk to you about. Not a lot, but some. So we're going to take a break, and we're going to have some cookies. I know. What is a cookie? Can somebody explain what a cookie is to me? And I realize that by doing so, we're ruining how you think about cookies, but that's just part of being a programmer. What is a cookie in a programming context, in a computing context? How would you describe that? Yeah, what's up? It's a string of data that's stored, you said in your browser. The browser is definitely controlling it, but it's really just on your computer somewhere. It's a file on your machine. In fact, you can go find them. You can go look them up and find them on your machine. I don't recommend doing that because A, you won't really be able to understand them. They'll look like gibberish to you, and B, it'll show you exactly how much stuff websites are storing on your computer, which is a little bit daunting. But if you really want to go find cookies on your computer, you absolutely can. Every browser has this location where they store all that information, and it's all there. You can find it all if you really want to. What are they used for? What do we use cookies for? What are some examples of what cookies are used for? Any ideas? Sessions, so we'll talk about sessions a little bit later on, but yeah, cookies and sessions kind of go hand in hand to some extent.
So when you return to a web page, it remembers.
Yeah, it remembers you, yeah. If you're anything like me, you don't want to have to type in your password every time you go to Facebook. That's just annoying. So what prevents you from having to do that? A cookie. A cookie remembers who you are. And then when you go to Facebook, instead of having to type in your password every time, it says, hey, this is Doug, take him to his Facebook page, and it just takes you right there. Same thing for your email, same thing for your Reddit account, same thing for all kinds of stuff. You will notice that some websites, though, don't like to mess with that. Like banking websites usually don't store your logins, right? So, you know, there's certainly a reason for that. Sometimes it's worthwhile to make that extra step required for the sake of security. But and honestly, I don't know about you guys, but I'd almost prefer that people get access to my bank account than my Reddit account. But I'm just kidding. All right. What else are cookies used for? That's one example. Remembering who you are. What else might they be used for? So other examples. Ad tracking. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later on. Ad tracking. Or I guess we can talk about it now. How does that work? How does it? You can see I had that on my agenda. How does an ad network work? Since somebody brought it up, let's talk about it. How does that work? Yeah, go ahead.
When you go to a web page,
Anything really. Yeah, any web page. Yeah.
So it has a cookie, and then something like data analytics through Google. They also put something on there.
Yeah, so there's an analytics piece involved. Google was the one that I believe that was mentioned in the prep work, but it's not just Google. Google is a popular target. It's a very common one, of course. So we actually have a name for that. I go to a website. I browse stuff on Amazon all the time. I'm a big video game nerd, so I'm browsing video game websites all the time, and then I start to see these video game advertisements pop up on other sites. What does it mean when I go to look at video games and it tells somebody else that I was on that site? What is that called? A third party. It's a third party cookie. How does that third party get that cookie? Ad networks? I mean, so think about this. There's restrictions on who can access cookies and at what points they can access cookies. So for example, if I go to, Amazon, can they put a cookie on my machine for Google? Can Amazon do that? No. Why not? Because it doesn't work that way? What specifically about the process prevents that from happening? What do I expect to see? There's a domain, yeah. There's a domain that's sent. This is another question. We're kind of bouncing all over the place, but that's fine. There's a domain that's sent in the header the cookie header that says, this is where this cookie is coming from. It's coming from this domain, and the browser will verify that that domain is the actual page that you are visiting, right? So how do these third-party ones work then? If I can only grab a cookie from a domain that I'm visiting, then how does the third party even become involved? Why isn't it just me talking to Amazon instead of me and Amazon and Google all happening at once? What happens? How do they do that? Yeah.
The third party actually has a piece of that web page, like a pixel or something,
Mm-hmm.
that belongs to their domain. So that little piece of the website is actually the part that gives you
Yeah.
a cookie for that domain.
Yeah, you nailed it. There's a little piece of the website that you visit that belongs to the third party, that has to be requested from this third party. We've been using Google in this situation. It could be anybody. So if I want to use Google AdSense or I want to use Google Analytics package, I'm giving Google permission to rent or just take a very small, very, 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 very small, not even visible to the human eye, piece of my website. I'm giving them that space. I'm saying, here, take this little chunk of space. You can have it. So that when somebody comes to my website, they're going to request this little tiny piece of space from Google, which now gives Google the ability to set a cookie on their machine. Yes?
So if I'm running like Google Analytics, one of the understandings is that they get to do that on my site, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. You're giving them permission to do that on your sites when you sign up for Google Analytics. You're giving Google access to put a little tiny reference to their stuff on your website. It's required. I mean, Google Analytics wouldn't work if you didn't give them that permission. They just sort of take advantage of that situation and say, yeah, we'll provide analytics for you, and then we'll also analyze your data as well. We'll use that for our own analytical purposes too, right? Because really that's what Google wants to do, collect a bunch of data, use it to sell people stuff. So it's sort of a win-win situation. That's why Google Analytics is free. It's a great, useful tool. Why do we get it for free? Well, because it's not free. Google's taking all that data and they're making money off of that information that you're providing them access to. That's the price of Google Analytics, which I know I'm painting a very bleak picture right now, but this is nothing new. This is nothing uncommon. This is how the internet has worked for a long time. And it's everywhere. It's all over the place. It does feel to me like it's gotten worse in recent years. You guys have seen all the ad blocker stuff that's been happening. You know, part of the ways that used to work is they find those little chunks in the web pages and turn them off. Say you can't store this third-party cookie anymore. And that's part of, not the only way that an ad blocker worked, but part of how an ad blocker would work is it would try and turn those links off. But as I'm sure you've noticed lately, there's been kind of a war on ad blockers recently, where websites are detecting that you're using ad blockers and saying you can't view this page anymore without ad blockers. As unpleasant as it is thinking about the massive scheme that is internet advertising, it's actually evolved quite a lot since the inception of the internet until now, and it's a pretty interesting evolution if you ever want to sit down and read about it, all the way back to those giant ugly banner ads that you used to see back in the 90s through today's modern advertisements where they'll play little videos and superimpose stuff on your screen that everybody hates, and everything in between. It's really changed a lot over the last couple decades. What other questions do you have about ad networks or that kind of stuff? Yeah.
Nothing but like private browsing, would that take away the third party?
I believe so. So Google has like the incognito mode, and Firefox, I believe, has a similar setup. I don't know what they call it, but it's a similar idea. I believe that disables cookies entirely. So yes, I believe that would stop ad networks, but it also, how they get you, or at least how they get me, is that cookies are actually a very useful piece of information, right? Some sites just work a lot better when you've got them turned on. Remembering who you are when you logged in is a very simple example. It's not that inconvenient to have to type my password in every single time I go to a website, but it bothers me enough that I don't do it. I just let them store cookies on my machine. So it's a matter of that threshold. Other sites actually, I think, just flat out won't work if you don't have cookies enabled. I'm trying to think of an example of a website that just flat out would not even work if you didn't allow cookies. And I'm drawing a blank off the top of my head right now, but so, you know, that's sort of the price we pay. Like most things in computing and even the world, just because something is useful and can be used to do good things doesn't mean that it will always necessarily be used for good things. People will find other ways to use it as well. And honestly, as much as I'm bashing it, ad networks, right? These things are all businesses. They need money to operate. That's one source of income. So ads are sort of a necessary evil as well. Maybe they're not as bad as we make them out to be. It's just part of how the world works. What other questions do you have? Yeah, in the back.
So in the kind of communicating intuition behind these things work, how these third parties work, but how do you actually place that on the page? Is it just like an A tag reference?
So the question was, how do you actually place that little tiny piece of information on the page? I know if you sign up for Google Analytics, one of the things that they do is say, all right, you're registered, take this code and paste it into your pages that you want to track. So they actually give you the code to put into your web page to track analytics. You just paste it right in. Typically you'd stick it in the header or the footer so it would show up on every single page of your website. And a lot of times that information would include, reference. So I don't think there's a link necessarily in that page, but it's definitely making a request to Google, which in turn is going to pass some information like, what website am I visiting? You know, what Google account is this website tied to? What analytics account is this website tied to? And so, that's all information that it needs to perform those analytics for you on your behalf. What other questions? Yeah. For your account, I believe that it is the same code. Yes, I believe that it is. And if that's surprising to you, consider that when you send a request, that request has a whole bunch of information associated with it, including who's making the request. That's the user agent, right? So when was this request made? Where is this request coming from? All that kind of stuff. So all that information will be sent as part of the request that Google can accept and then analyze however they want to. I gotta be honest with you, I'm not a super duper expert on what Google is doing with all that information. I'm more on the side that you guys are on, where I'm building websites and using Google Analytics. What happens after that information goes off to Google? Your guess is probably as good as mine. Yes? Yes, that's absolutely true. I'm glad you brought that up. You'll see a lot of times, especially I've seen this with news websites a lot. It doesn't have to be a news website though, that cookies are being used. There's that notification at the bottom of the screen. And guess what? A lot of you probably don't even read it anymore. You just click the X because it's getting in your way and you just want to read the thing, right? That's exactly what they want you to do. It's exactly what they want you to do. But on the other hand, they didn't used to tell people at all that cookies were being used. They just used them. And so, for a large portion of the internet's life cycle, cookies were being thrown around left and right and people had no idea. The average user had no idea that that was even a thing that was happening, that we were giving up space on our own computers just to browse the internet. That was not a thing that was widely known. So in that sense, having those notifications, while you might consider them an annoyance, is actually progress in terms of keeping the public informed about what's going on with their stuff. Great questions. What other questions do you have? Any other questions about ad networks or other? Yes?
More of a current issue sort of thing. The legislation going through now about privacy.
Okay, I'm not familiar with it. I'm not familiar with that particular piece of legislation?
Basically a big package of regulations that are gonna affect cookies and change privacy policies for most popular websites to be like opt-in.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
So
Yeah, and that's interesting. I'm not familiar with it. However, I'm not surprised. The European Union actually has tended to be a lot more strict about these kinds of regulations, user privacy regulations, than we are here in the United States. So that doesn't surprise me at all. I'm sure you all are aware, however, that user privacy is definitely taken a big place in the news lately, with Mr. Zuckerberg himself testifying in front of Congress. Doesn't relate directly to cookies, but kind of in the same idea of protecting user privacy. All of that stuff sort of falls under that umbrella. So it's certainly an important topic, and one that's not going to go away anytime soon. People are going to keep fighting about this one for a little while, for sure. What other questions? I've got some more technical kinds of questions for you, but what other questions do you have right now? All right, so cookie headers. So we kind of talked about this, but we kind of skipped it a little bit as well. If I'm a server and I want to set a cookie, what kinds of information am I going to send to a browser? What am I going to say? I'm going to say set cookie, and then what else do I have to say as part of that? The key and value. So what is the information that I want to store, right? What else do I have to send? The domain, so that's part of it as well. And then there's some optional stuff that I can send as well. An expiration date. If I don't send an expiration date, when does it expire? When you close the browser, which defines this guy right here, right? A session cookie. That's what a session cookie is. If I don't specify an expiration date, then that cookie expires as soon as I close the browser, which theoretically implies that that cookie just gets deleted, it just gets removed from your machine as soon as you close your browser. Possibly. Now, they could be setting other information in that cookie that does not expire, right? So if it needs to keep that information around, then it will do so. But I can set an expiration date for a cookie if I would like to. And in fact, that's a necessary part for doing what we just talked about. If I want to remember a user who's logged in, I have to specify that this cookie lives for a particular period of time, some time in the future. Oftentimes we'll just pick some very arbitrarily long point in the future so that it just works for forever, right? Or as close to forever as is applicable to us. All right. And so then if I'm on a browser side, then what happens when I visit a website? How does a server even know what information might be available? It's one thing for a server to save information on my computer, but if it's just sitting on my computer, then how does it actually get used? I go to Reddit. Reddit saves a cookie on my machine, on my computer, indicating that I am this guy on Reddit. How does that information then get used? Let's say I go away for a while and I come back later. Then what? Then I go back to Reddit. What happens? What happens? It takes a look. So when I go to visit Reddit, my browser is going to go look at all the cookies that I have and say, hey, do I have any cookies for this website, for Reddit? And if it finds them and they aren't expired, it'll check the expiration date. If it finds those cookies and they aren't expired, it'll send them. It'll say, here you go, here's the information that I logged last time. And the server will use that information when servicing my request. So if it sees that my login information is in there, then it won't ask me to log in. It'll just show me the website, right? It'll just automatically show me that stuff. So your browser is complicit in this as well. In other words, on our end, we're constantly sending those cookies back to the server so that they can do stuff with them. It wouldn't work otherwise. And then on our side, in Flask, How do we use cookies? There's a couple of correct answers to this question. How do we actually use cookies in Flask? A couple ways we can do this. So we've talked about requests before, and we often use requests to do what in the past? Before today, I would access the request to do what? To get the parameters, any parameters that were being passed. Well, we can also use them to access cookies. So I can also use a request to access cookies. So if I want to read a cookie, I can get to that through the request object. If I want to make a new cookie, I can get to that through the request object. That's one way that we use cookies, but there's actually another way that we can use cookies that we've already been doing. The session object. The session object. What's the difference between the two? Does anybody know? What's the difference between the two?
One pulling out the
Variable versus state. Well, I'm glad you brought state into this, because one of the things that we talked about a few weeks back was that HTTP was a stateless protocol, right? And the answer to why it can do that is that a session is used to remember information. A session is used to remember state. So basically, a state is something like who's logged in right now, right? Who's using my website, stuff like that. So sessions are used for that purpose. The difference between the session variable that we've been using and the request is, clearly the code is different, but they're both variables. They can both be accessed using variables in Flask. Is there any other difference between the two? The types of cookies that they create? Anything like that? The session variable certainly implies that we're using session-based cookies that are going to expire as soon as we close the browser. Now, it's been a little while since I've attempted to do this, but it's certainly possible that you could use a session. I'm pretty sure it's possible you could use a session object to make permanent cookies that don't expire right away. Typically, it's not used for that purpose, though. If I want to make permanent cookies, we would use the request object to save those cookies on a more permanent basis, whereas the session object is used for session-based cookies, typically. Last but certainly not least, if you made it to the end of the prep work, you saw Chris Bay, who's the narrator for these videos, talked about a couple of things. He even did a little bit of magic in the developer console, where he sort of dissected one of these cookies. He even changed a cookie and gave it different information. How do we stop people from doing that? Anybody have any ideas? There's one technique shown in the very last video that was kind of trying to stop people from doing that.
Put a dot with a bunch of stuff after it.
Dot with a bunch of stuff. What was that bunch of stuff?
I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't know that we've gotten quite that far yet. It is coming. We're going to be talking about it in more detail next week. It's a hash. It's a hash. So if you don't know what a hash is, that's okay. We haven't really dealt with them a whole lot up until now. They're a very useful tool. Not the last time you're going to see them. Very useful for all kinds of security types of applications. We're going to talk about them in more detail on Monday, I believe, next week. So you'll be hearing a lot more about them very soon. But one thing we can do is try to hash our cookies. Makes them less intuitive to the users about what's actually in there. You saw, though, even in the very last video, that even though it was hashed, he was still able to go in there and undo it, right? He was still able to go in there and turn that gibberish into something meaningful. So that means one of two things. The hash wasn't very good, which is definitely true. The hash that was used was not very good. There are much stronger ways of doing it. And that Chris really had more information than he should have in that scenario. For security to work, there needs to be something that's kept a secret from people who don't need to know that information. But he knew that information. It was not a secret to him, so he was able to undo it. And unfortunately, with security, that's always true. If there's secret information that gets out, that's not secret anymore, then people are going to be able to break your stuff. That is always true. You have to protect those secretive pieces of information. We have techniques for that. To help us out, but that's not a conversation for today. I just kind of wanted you to be aware of those kinds of things because they're coming up. it's going to be on our radar here very soon. What other questions do you have about cookies? Any other questions about cookies, how they're used? We've actually already been using them. That was kind of cool. That's why, part of the reason why there's not a studio today. The other part is just to give us some time to breathe, catch up a little bit. Do you have any more questions for me right now? Do you have any questions about the assignments then? Build a blog is due today. Blogs is due next Thursday. If you have questions about that stuff, I'd be happy to take any quick questions you have about assignment stuff. Yeah.
It's not particularly about assignments, but it's great talking about this stuff on our local machines. Is there going to be a class where we talk about actually putting things on the internet?
Actually putting things on the internet. So, so correct me if I'm wrong. Let me make sure I'm understanding what you're asking. Right now, we've been developing all this stuff, but it's just on our laptop, meaning that if I wanted to show it off to my friends and my family, that basically the way I have to do that is take my laptop over to their house and show it to them, right? I can't give them an address and say, go here and look what I've been doing in class. That's not going to work. You can through GitHub, yes, but I got to be honest with you, my mom's not going to know what the heck to do on GitHub.com.
And it's not going to run your SQL database.
It's not going to actually run your code. It's not going to access your stuff. My friends at work, sure, I can show them a GitHub page and they'll be just fine with that, but friends and family, not so much. So to answer your question, the good news is that a server, which is where we go to access web pages, is really just a computer. It's just a bigger, beefier computer than the one that you use, probably. We just don't have one because they're oftentimes expensive. They cost money to set up and to use. However, other people have them and they will usually let you use them. You can either pay them some money or sometimes use them for free. So you need to find what's called a hosting service, which has a whole bunch of servers that are just available for use. There are free hosting services. A lot of times they'll want to put ads on your website instead of for allowing you to use it for free, or you can pay a small amount of money, usually per month, to host a website. It's oftentimes based on how big your website is and how many people are using your website. So for a very small website like what we're using, you could get very cheap hosting. It would not cost you a lot of money at all. But honestly, if you wanted to show off your work, if you wanted to make your work public online, sign up for a hosting service, copy all of your data onto their server, you're done. That's really all it would take. If your website is truly functional, that's really all it would take. Copy all the Python, all the HTML onto their server, set up the database on their server, and you're good to go.
They don't need special programs like MAMP or anything, or it should be installed?
The hosting service should have that stuff installed already for you. That's something that I guess you need to be aware of when you sign up for a hosting service is, do you have a database installed on this server that I can use? Some will, some won't. Most hosting services these days will already have database services set up and installed, ready for their customers to use. Not all of them, but most of them will. It's just a matter of, it's shopping. It really honestly is shopping. Here's the stuff that I need to make my website work. Who can provide that to me? And how much money do they want to make it happen? If you want to try something on a smaller scale, you can actually set up your own server. That is possible. It's a little bit more work. It's definitely more effort to set up your own server. But I've known friends and colleagues who take an old computer that's just collecting dust somewhere, set it up in a closet, and configure it to run as a server. You can totally do that. In fact, MAMP can kind of help you out with that. It's a little dangerous, because if you're controlling the server, then you're the one who's in charge of making sure that it's secure, that somebody online isn't going to come hack the crap out of it, right? So it puts more of that responsibility on you. We don't really teach that stuff in this class because that's more of a system administrator role at most companies. So if and when you get an apprenticeship somewhere, there will be a system administrator who's paid a lot of money to make sure that people don't hack into your company's servers. That's their job. And they get paid a lot of money to do it. If you're interested in it, though, I'd be happy to have a conversation with you about that kind of stuff. And you may even end up in a situation like me where you know, my employer has a bunch of servers, and they give me a little piece of one that I can use to do whatever I want with. That's how I do a lot of the stuff for my classes, using their servers. But you know, they've got a whole team of IT folks who are making sure that those servers are up and running and not getting into trouble. What other questions do you have? About assignments, about cookies, anything at all? Yes?
I'm just curious, we covered add and update in the SQL. Is there a reason why we didn't go with delete? Or you can't?
Was delete not in the prep work? I mean, I don't know of any reason why we wouldn't have covered deletions. Yeah, I don't know. The good news is that if you understand how insert and update work, delete is probably even easier than both of those. Biggest thing with delete is make sure you do to include a where clause. Otherwise, it'll delete everything, which is probably not what you want.
It's just a DB session delete? Or
Delete. Are we talking about SQL or what are we?
SQL alchemy.
we didn't do any deletes.
Oh, we didn't do any deletes. Oh, you're talking about on the Flask side. Okay, I'm sorry. I misunderstood your question. Yes, I believe actually in the SQL Alchemy side, it's as simple as saying the db.session.delete. It might be called remove. I don't remember. Potato. And then you pass it the object that you want to be deleted, and it will delete it for you. Part of the reason that we haven't talked about that is because the way our application is set up, we just don't have a use case for it, right? We don't want people to, we don't want to delete accounts. Even if somebody wants to delete their account, and this is true too, even think about things like Facebook, which has been in the news a lot lately. If I really want to delete my Facebook account, do you really think they're going to throw out all my stuff? No, they're not going to throw out all my stuff. They're going to make it so that nobody can access it anymore, including me, but they're going to keep a whole bunch of it. It's all still going to be sitting there on their servers. Well, okay. He said they deleted it, yeah. I mean, I'm sure that they do delete some stuff. I'm sure that they are going to keep other stuff around. I don't know. I don't work at Facebook, so I guess I should probably keep my mouth shut before they watch this video on YouTube and sue me or something. But yeah, a lot of times when you delete an account on a service, it's really just deactivated. The information's not truly gone, it's just not easily accessible anymore. It's more like flipping a switch instead of removing something. I know that was a very long answer to your question. Sorry. What other questions do you have? Any other questions? Quick logistical note. Jake's group. Jake is feeling a little ill today. He wasn't able to make it in. So instead of meeting in this room, Jake's group, if you could meet back in the classroom instead. Mia and Carolyn are in there, and so we're just gonna sort of combine your group with their group today. There should be enough room in the classroom for that to happen. So if you're in Jake's group, the group that usually meets over here in the NAACP room, head back to the classroom instead, and they'll get you set up back there. Everybody else, I think, should be good to know. So use this time wisely. There's no studio today. Finish build a blog. That should be priority number 1. And start on blogs if you got that done already. Thanks, everybody.